Ten Commandments wasn't just an iconic remake, it became a Hollywood giant. But behind the parting seas and golden calves lurk some truly bizarre production tales, casting choices, and cultural quirks. These are 22 shocking facts the cast revealed about the Ten Commandments no one figured out. And as a bonus, I'll reveal how the director almost lost his life during filming. So, sit back and let's rewind time. Number 1. The Ten Commandments wasn't just another Hollywood production. Prior to its release, it held the title of the costliest movie ever produced. It cost the studio a whopping $13 million, and best of all, this was in 1956. Adjusted for inflation, it would have cost $140 million to recreate today. Even with Paramount being a giant in Hollywood, this film is still considered to be its most expensive investment ever. Yet, it wasn't for nothing, recreating some of the most epic biblical moments ever seen on television. Even the set was handcrafted to perfectly resemble Egyptian architecture, while the constant moving between Hollywood and Egypt certainly helped to inflate the costs. Then it all paid off, becoming a blockbuster long before the term ever existed. But you wouldn't guess the massive return on investment the studio got. Number 2. All of this spending might seem ridiculous, but when the film was released, its reception was positive from all walks of life. In the United States, it banked more than $65 million in domestic ticket sales, which was already a crazy figure back then. When adjusted for modern inflation, it meant that it would have made more than $700 million today. Thanks to all the work and the special effects, the film sealed the legacy of director Cecil B. DeMille, turning him into one of the greatest directors in Hollywood history. Perhaps the fact that it was released so close to Easter helped boost the sales. But can you guess how old the director was? Number 3. Cecil B. DeMille wasn't just your typical director. He was a towering figure in Hollywood, and one of the biggest names to ever work on the silver screen. 75 years old at the time, he took on one of the biggest and most ambitious projects of his entire career, already having created the first version of the same film as early as 1923. But this time, he wanted to go bigger, more dramatic, and use some of the latest technology to really drive home a production that would stand the test of time. It sounded like a myth or a dream, but DeMille was going to turn it into something spectacular, even spending hours himself in the hot Egyptian sun, using his microphone to direct extras, and making sure that each scene was simply perfect. This wasn't directing a movie anymore, but rather like commanding a cinematic army that brought real biblical stories to life and showed the world what the limits of technology were like in the 1950s. Yet, it wasn't a simple production that just took a few days to produce. Number 4. To create a film on such a massive scale takes time, and when you have a director who is clear on what he wants, it can take even longer. But filming in both Hollywood and Egypt meant a lot of travel, turning this from a quick production into a marathon. The film took a whopping 2 years to complete from start to finish, with the principal photography already starting in October of 1954 and stretching all the way into 1955. But then it was time for the post-production and editing, which took another year, continuing throughout 1956. Thanks to some incredible detail and having each set built by hand, it was a logistical operation akin to what you'd expect from the military. What dragged it out even more was the fact that much of the equipment had to be custom built, with thousands of props and wardrobes to be flown out. In fact, the single scene depicting the parting of the Red Sea took months just to plan, before another month was needed to nail the acting and ensure that everything happened exactly the way DeMille intended it to happen. But even then, he was fuzzy, and some scenes had to be redone, with DeMille claiming that it wasn't as perfect as he wanted. The crew had to get new makeup, dress up again, and then it was shot again and again until it was as perfect as he initially intended. So, how did they manage to split the sea when there was no CGI available? The answer is really bizarre. Number 5. Unfortunately, splitting the Red Sea isn't really possible unless you have God actively working alongside you. But this didn't deter DeMille, who believed that his idea would make it seem as realistic as it sounded in the Bible. DeMille went for a combination of Jell-O and water, which was added to giant tanks using the gelatin to thicken the substance to make it much easier to move around. The crew began by filming 2 walls of the liquid on either side, as it was being released from the U-shaped tanks. The liquid slowly moved from the tank into a ditch that was dug, eventually filling it completely. But the real magic happened post-production and during the editing, when they reversed the footage to make it appear as if it was splitting open and standing still. The part where Moses actually raises his staff was later added to create the real scene depicted in the Bible. Even more impressive was how they used fans to show the winds they talked about. In its entirety, it took a massive 6 months to film this scene, with no computer graphics, just some real ingenuity. Number 6. One of the most epic parts of the entire film was when God spoke to Moses. But this was another tricky situation, with the director unsure of whose voice he should use to make it feel authentic. In true biblical fashion, he realized that perhaps the voice of God sounds more like an inner voice coming through, instead of some foreign voice coming from the outside. So, if you listen closely, the voice of God sounds eerily familiar to one of the voices you have already heard throughout the rest of the film. It still sounds powerful and commanding, but the actor who played Moses, Charlton Heston, is actually the voice of God as well. Director Cecil B. DeMille wanted it to sound like an inner echo, with Moses hearing a divine version of himself. So, Heston recorded his voice earlier, and when the burning bush scene happened, the production team simply layered it over the filming. But this wasn't the only time God speaks. And when he delivers the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, it was another voice that was used, specifically to create the dual layer of mystery to the divine. This time, it was actually publicist Jesse Delos Jukes who spoke as God, using the deep bass in his voice to create this divine moment. Number 7. One of the criteria required for the actor who portrayed Moses was that he actually looked like a chiseled Greek god. DeMille wanted someone who looked like he could fight, almost resembling the look of a gladiator who would one day become a king. Then Charlton Heston came along, and he blew DeMille away with his Michelangelo look, commanding presence, and powerful voice. If you look closely at his appearance in the film, he looks very similar to the Michelangelo statue of Moses. The only demand was that Heston grow out his beard in a similar fashion to that of Moses, with audiences immediately accepting him as an authentic, strong, and capable leader of the Israelites. But this role had even more consequences for Hollywood, setting the new standard of how a hero should look, and perhaps the reason why many top heroes like Rocky, Rambo, and Conan were always in incredible shape, looking like they could do the impossible. Yet, Baby Moses was one of the most heartfelt additions to the entire production. Number 8. In one of the greatest opening scenes ever depicted in Hollywood, the whole story of Baby Moses is on display. Viewers could see him drifting in the Nile with his basket. But instead of hiring a new actor, or even using a dummy to be the baby, DeMille wanted authenticity. He wanted the baby to move and feel like a real person born for a divine journey. So, instead of hiring a new cast member, DeMille chose to use Heston's own infant. Fraser Clark Heston didn't just set the stage for the rest of the film that was to come, but he resembled an adult Moses to a T. What's even more fascinating is how the baby handled the iconic scene, drifting in the water and surrounded by crocodiles. At least he was safely restrained, and no crocodile could have come close to even hurting the young kid. When Fraser finally grew up, he actually followed in the footsteps of his father to traverse Hollywood. Yet he wasn't an actor, but rather turned out to be a director. At least he has this acting credit to his name. Number 9. Back in the 1950s, a massive production like this screamed for stereophonic photography and special effects that would have added another layer of drama and captured every single moment for what it was worth. Had stereo been added to the film, it would have likely even been up to modern standards, still doing incredible numbers in the 21st century. Yet DeMille was stubborn and specifically wanted it to be filmed in mono. Despite everyone telling him to change the production and choose stereo instead, DeMille argued. He believed that filming it in mono gave it a purer feeling that ultimately felt more like something that could have come from the Bible. Number 10. Since Moses, or Charlton Heston, had such an impressive physique, it was only fitting that his biggest nemesis, Ramesses, also looked the part and could significantly contribute to the final production. Yet, this wasn't always easy, as the Russian-born star didn't have the same genetics. To pull off the look, he hit the weights hard, spending days in the gym to finally reach that incredible physique worthy of the King of Egypt. His look was iconic, and one that is often used today when talking about King Ramesses, or for his depictions in stories. But the actor, Yul Brynner, didn't just look great. He also became the first ever Russian US movie star, long before some of the more common names were even born. It could be said that he opened the door for more stars from foreign countries to apply their trade in the United States. Number 11. Having thousands of actors and animals present for the production wasn't easy, and when they all traveled to Egypt, everyone needed some accommodation. This became one of the most overlooked parts of the production. But to accommodate everyone, the crew built an entire city in the middle of the desert, complete with drivable roads, massive statues, and buildings that almost made it feel like a city from the Bible. It took more than 1,000 crew members to pull off this massive feat to sustain even more extras and cast members for a few months at a time. It literally turned into a small city, with self-sustaining features like kitchens, medical facilities, and workshops where many of the props were designed. But once the production was finished, DeMille ordered that everything be dismantled and buried in the dunes. Now, more than 60 years later, it is still just sitting there, with people calling it the lost city of Cecil DeMille. Number 12. A lot of rumors were going around that the entire production was haunted, and that perhaps evil spirits might not have wanted it to proceed. In fact, many claimed that a real-life ghost was spotted on set. When filming the Mount Sinai scene, it is alleged that many of the crew spotted a figure in white robes, just motionlessly standing there at a distance. What's even more horrifying is that when they thought it was an extra who was waiting for directions, someone sent another cast member out there to check on the poor fella. Yet, when they got there, he simply vanished. Perhaps it was some kind of spiritual manifestation, which would have been fitting given the real tone of the film and the overall theme it followed. With so many different beliefs, the rumors persisted, and the cast continued telling their tale for decades to come. Apparently, it was even named the Watcher of the Dunes. But why was Egyptian makeup so controversial? Number 13. One of the biggest controversies of the film was the makeup used by actress Ann Baxter for her role as Nefertiti. To create the makeup, the crew focused on murals and depictions on the walls of caves, which often portrayed the influential women wearing what looked like elaborate makeup. To make this look realistic, they added bold eyeliner with shimmering eyeshadow, while the vibrant lipstick looked extremely intense on her face. It created exactly the figure DeMille wanted, inspired primarily by real Egyptian art. She was supposed to represent the opulence of the pharaoh's court. It worked, turning Baxter into a sensational princess. But critics were split, with many calling it too modern, and others saying that it undermined the real spiritual tone of the film. Nevertheless, the look continued to encourage fashion choices in Hollywood, even becoming iconic. Number 14. To promote the film all over the United States, DeMille came up with an idea so cunning that it might still even work today. To ensure that everyone across the country knew about it, he instructed Paramount to create 150 granite tablets with the 10 Commandments all written on them. These tablets were not just handed out, they were placed as full-size permanent monuments across the United States. Each one was about 6 feet tall and probably cost thousands of dollars. Then, a campaign by the Fraternal Order of Eagles also hopped on the bandwagon to promote the film, almost like a religious event. Many of them remain as a reminder of how much effort went into creating one of the most elaborate and historically accurate movies ever made. But how did they even create the burning bush? Number 15. There is no doubt that when you think of the 10 Commandments, the burning bush is one of the most important and iconic scenes. Yet getting there was crazy, and unlike the 21st century, they simply couldn't rely on CGI. So, DeMille came up with a crazy plan. They actually filmed real flames, and then, using some great editing, it was superimposed on top of a prop bush. This made it burn without consuming the bush, to ensure that the scene could play out. Some rumors suggest that they did try this with a real bush, but the fire was hard to contain, especially when filming with the Egyptian heat already burning the cast. But DeMille didn't just stop there. He took it one step further by using colored lights to cast an eerie glow across Moses and the surrounding landscape. Since DeMille never publicly revealed how they pulled it off, it was shrouded in mystery for decades. Many viewers actually believe that the film was divine, and that some kind of real biblical moment assisted in creating the masterpiece. Number 16. Another truly heartwarming scene was when the Israelites finally fled from Egypt, taking along with them the animals and all their belongings. However, DeMille didn't want to use props, nor did he want special effects. He wanted to use real animals, and this made for some hilarious chaos. Sheep actually got loose and ran onto sets that were filming unrelated scenes, while the crew often tripped when trying to move around the animals. It is said that at one point, a mule simply laid down, refusing to budge, and this delayed the entire production. The crew said that it was absolute chaos on the set, and it took them days to finally master. But they finally pulled it off, creating something truly iconic that felt like it was helped by the animals. You can see this when rewatching a film today, and it is also something that will probably never be done again. Funnily enough, 14,000 men and women were used in the cast, but a whopping 15,000 animals played their part to create this masterpiece. Number 17. One of the craziest stories ever told from the filming of this classic is how the director nearly lost his life during the filming process. While directing the massive scene on top of Mount Sinai, DeMille climbed 130 feet atop a faulty camera rig on the massive Exodus Gates set when he suddenly suffered from a heart attack. Many believe that it would be the tragic moment that stopped the production, but the real stubbornness of DeMille once again came to the forefront. By pure force of will, he returned to the set just 2 days later to continue filming and bossing everyone around. No one would ever forget this iconic moment, with it turning into a mythical story that surely solidified him as one of the greatest and most unbreakable directors Hollywood had ever seen. But another animal almost cracked the production. Number 18. So, intent on using real animals and having the whole film be authentic, DeMille even suggested using a real cobra for the cobra scene. In a biblically accurate scene, Moses had his staff turn into a cobra when he was confronted by the Pharaoh. With the help of a snake wrangler, DeMille insisted on using a real cobra for the scene, and the idea was to capture footage of it slithering and striking, which later would be superimposed onto the actual scene. But it almost turned into a real disaster when the cobra escaped the clutches of its wrangler and caused some panic on set, while the snake wrangler tried to find his snake. So he conceded, and a fake rubber snake was brought in for the production. In the final production, the real snake can be seen, blended with the fake snake. Number 19. While much of the filming was actually safe, there were a few moments that led to some actual on-set injuries, particularly the chariot scenes, which saw the crew use real horses that pulled chariots through tight corners and at blistering speeds. It was truly iconic and made everything feel like it was real life. But getting these scenes was crazily dangerous. While none of the main actors were used, many of the stuntmen found themselves missing serious injury simply by how accurately a horse treaded its steps. One stuntman reportedly broke several ribs during the production, which made it even more horrific. But at least it was one of the greatest moments, and it will never happen in another film ever again. With modern safety protocols, you can be sure that every single modern scene will be filmed using CGI. Number 20. One of the most biblically accurate moments of the entire film was the plagues that struck Egypt as a warning from God to the Pharaoh. The most impressive of them all was the 10th plague, known as the death of all firstborn sons, with the angel coming to collect on everyone who didn't have a mark above their home. To make this feel authentic, fog was used with layered matte paintings, essentially building a ghostly scene from nothing. Yet portraying the actual angel of death was crazy, and to pull it off, DeMille used a real human skull. Unfortunately, no one knows who the skull came from, and this was never revealed. But it certainly grounded the real horror of the supernatural in a scene that truly struck fear into the hearts of not only the crew, but audiences all around the world. Number 21. For those watching at home, the film might have felt like an authentic depiction of what really happened during these biblical times. Yet, the director took a few creative liberties of his own. Some of the plot lines were not actually accurate to that of the Bible, especially the love triangle that was formed between Ramses, Moses, and Nefertiti. In fact, many of the scenes were made up just to enhance the tension and drive forward the story, while allowing the development of the characters. Yet it was still one of the most accurately depicted films ever created. Number 22. Before there was this version of the Ten Commandments, director Cecil B. DeMille actually created a first version in 1923. But this didn't have the budget, nor did it have the capacity to become something incredible. Even though he took the same approach, it was filmed in the dunes of California. Many of the artifacts on the set were actually uncovered by archaeologists who dug it up in 2014. But this wasn't just a film fit for a king. It was one that transcended time and is still relevant 60 years later. It didn't require any follow-ups, even though it might be nice to see what DeMille would have come up with today. It was just as iconic as a 1993 film called Tombstone, which had some incredible, even concerning character choices of its own. Make sure to check out this video to find out why.